your name and stuff.
My name is Denise Howard Giles Mincy, and I am known as Boo. Grew up in Powersville, Georgia. That's about 4 miles south of Fort Valley and Byron, kind of in the center. It was a small little place that had one road called Lakeview Road. I grew up with a lot of people near me that I still love and know today and are still living, and we get together right frequently. I had a really good childhood.
Do you remember that story about the witch with the warts?
Oh, yes, I do. My father's brother was named A.J. Howard, and I was just troubled with warts starting at about the time I was 10 years old, and I had them on my ankle, I had one on my thumb, I had some on my finger, and my parents tried every kind of medicine you could try. Compound W at the time was the wart medicine. Nothing worked, and we were over at my Uncle AJ's house one day, and we were discussing the terrible thing that I had all these warts and couldn't get rid of them. And my Uncle AJ said, with my parents' permission, he knew someone that could take them off. So my father, my Uncle AJ, and myself rode over to a lady's house. There was nothing unusual looking about the house. There was nothing unusual looking about the lady. However, she had some kind of power, because I was told to follow her into her kitchen. My father, my uncle could not come in. She had me sit down, and she took a dish rag and put some dry peas in it, like black-eyed peas, and she came over and rubbed every wart I had with that dish rag and told me, and mumbled something, some kind of gibberish. Sort of scary, but gibberish.
Yeah.
And I was really kind of afraid there for a second, but she did that. She told me to, I think she had me sit on her counter, and she told me to get down off the counter, walk out the door, and never look back. And I did. And we continued our visit. We went back to Michael A.J.'s house, and we visited. We went home, and within 2 weeks, every wart I had was gone, never came back.
Do you think she was a witch?
I wonder sometimes. I think maybe a lot of people back in those days, they sort of believed in black magic, black potions, that type of thing. And apparently she had worked some miracle for my uncle, or he would have not known about her as well. If people were born, she called it, with a veil over their face, that they could tell the future, and that they were capable of doing the kind of things I told you about this lady. And I don't know, maybe this lady was born that way.
Folk medicine is the treatment of injury or ailments using tradition instead of scientific practice. My grandma's story about the old woman healing her warts using peas, a dish rag, and chanting involves folk medicine. We're not sure if her warts went away due to getting older, or maybe this woman's technique did actually work. Either way, my grandma says those warts never came back. We also discussed my grandma's theory that this woman could have been a witch and was practicing magic. We discussed witches like Baba Yaga in our fairy tale unit during the semester. If this woman was a witch, she was using her power for good, unlike common interpretations of the story of Baba Yaga.
Well, the county decided to consolidate and become Peach County High School. So I was in the first 10th grade class when we had full integration. I had a lot of friends that were African American students, thought the world of them. To pause there, I had a really good friend in the 8th grade, I think I told you about, named Mercedes, and I just really loved her. And my father kidded me and called her Mercedes, but her name was pronounced Mercedes. No, that's not right. Her name was Mercedes, but it was written as Mercedes, and he always kidded me about Mercedes, like the car. Anyway, so when we became Peach County High School, it was a different time and place, and it was different for us, but it was also different for the black children that came over from Hunt High. Um, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just, we had a very big high school. It was a 2-story school. So we had stairs. We had to go to different classes. And I know nowadays, thank goodness, that's not an issue anymore. But in 1970, it was. And we had an American history teacher. His name was Mr. Jordan. Had him for 10th grade American history. And just the way, Liliana, he placed his desk in the classroom, he had them positioned on the sides of the wall like this, and on the other side the same way. And then there was maybe a couple of rows in the center that faced the board. And I think he did that in hindsight to bring everybody closer together. And I've often wondered where he is today. He's probably deceased. But there was a lot of unrest problems. During the school, we had a lot of bomb threats. We spent most of that year in our football stadium so they could clear the schools. It was hard for everybody. But Mr. Jordan taught us American history, and we got into class one day, probably 7-8 weeks into school, and he said, we're going to do something different today. And he said, we're going to talk about the big white elephant in the room, which is total integration. And he said, I want everybody to talk freely and tell us how you feel. And so I had a classmate named Frank Wiley, and Frank got up and said that it was very hard for the white children because we were not used to that. And everybody listened to his point of view. And then we had a African American student, and he raised his hand and stood up and told us that this is just as hard for us leaving our school, our high school, our elementary school, our teachers. It's just as hard for us. Yeah. And that was in 1970, and now I'm 70 years old. And that attempt of bringing that class together meant so much then, and it means so much now to me. He could not have taught a better lesson than that. And that class was one, as a result of that everybody looked forward to, because we were all friends, we were all together. And he was a great teacher. He may have been like kind of a leftover hippie, because he had the big afro and all, and he was very sweet, very nice. And when he was teaching, he would say, let me bring it home to you. Let me reiterate that for you. So he was just very great. He stayed with me all these years. That particular day in that class stayed with me all these years. And it really brought everybody together. And it's a shame all my classes weren't like that. I graduated, we were all friends.
Oh, that's good.
So that was to me, very significant thing that happened, and I won't ever forget it. I mean, it would be great if teachers today could kind of learn from that.
Yeah.
Another story about him, he was just a great teacher, and he taught more than American history. But we all get in one day and he tells us we're going to have a pop quiz, and you get the usual, oh no, we didn't study, I know that. So he said, well, we're going to have a pop quiz. And he said, I'm going to hand out all these papers. I want you to leave them face down, and when I tell you to turn them over. Read the test before you start, and you'll have 10 minutes. I'm going to time you. Everybody gets their paper. He times. He says, okay, everybody turn over your paper. We do. We just start writing. The last thing on that paper is, if you didn't read the instructions, or if you had read the instructions, you would know that you're not to answer any of these questions on the pop quiz. And so we all failed, but he didn't count the grade against us.
Culture and personal narrative. Culture can be described as the patterns of human actions and behavior. In this personal narrative, my boo discusses how integration of her high school, Peach County High School, in 1970 was an adjustment for both black and white children, but it resulted in positive change. She also discusses her teacher who helped make the adjustment easier for everyone. The integration described in her school combined two different cultures, which created new school and personal traditions, as well as more important stories and history to tell and remember.
And we were sitting in the pew, and somebody sat in a pew behind me and tapped me on the shoulder. It was your grandfather, it was Wayne, and he introduced himself. I introduced myself. Didn't think anything about it. So he asked me, could he call me? I said, sure. Wayne starts calling me. I didn't know he was calling me. And so probably for about 5 weeks or longer, the phone would ring. My daddy would pick it up. I was asked for, and my daddy would say, she's in the tub. She's in the tub. She's in the tub. Well, at some point, I wondered why Wayne had not called me. And I asked my dad, I said, Daddy, has anybody else called lately? A fella called, and he said, well, yeah, I tell him you're in the tub. I said, is it the same guy? He said, no, this is a different guy. Different guy. And I said, what's his name? And he told me. I was terribly embarrassed. So I always tell people, I guess he must have thought, you must be the cleanest person that's ever been in the world.
Personal narrative. My boo then tells a story of how her and my papa met when they were in high school in church. She's telling a personal narrative or a story told orally about an event in the storyteller's life. Personal narratives are often connected to themes like humor, family values, and worldview. These are all elements of my grandma's story, among many others. Number 1, humor. This story is funny because my grandpa had been calling for all that time, and my boo's father had still thought it was a different guy, the guy that my grandma wasn't interested in. My grandma then says that my papa probably thought she was the cleanest girl in the world. Number 2, family values. My boo wasn't allowed to date until she was 16. These are rules made by her parents. Her parents' morals shaped her perception of dating and, furthermore, her worldview. Number 3, worldview. Because she had just started dating, my grandma had just started to learn the cultural expectations of it. Personal narratives are so important because they keep stories alive, and I know that this story is very important to my family, and me and all my siblings and cousins always ask for this story because we love it, and my grandma loves to tell it.
I'm so honored that you wanted to talk to me,
Oh yeah.
Liliana. I
You're the best.
appreciate that.
You're the best storyteller I know. Thank you. Thank you for
Well, I'm
talking.
sure you could probably find someone much more interesting.
No, I honestly, your stories have always been interesting. Like like as soon as I heard about this project, I was like,
Good.